Yo, what's up YouTube? I'm Max. This is my affirmation video to a book I've been copying called The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle. This is my affirmation journal. I have everything written here basically verbatim as I have written the book and I've written everything here. All my affirmations, same thing, one take. I'm Max and I'm trying to read it to you. Realizing pure consciousness. Its presence is the same as being. When you become conscious as being of what is really happening around you and your being is conscious of itself, that's presence. Since being conscious and life are synonymous, and we could say that presence means consciousness and being conscious of itself is life attaining self-consciousness, but we are but yet attached to the words and do not make any effort to understand this. There is nothing that you need to understand before you can become present. I do understand that you have just said it seems to imply that being is the ultimate transcendental reality, is not yet complete, and is undergoing a process of development. Does God need time for personal growth? Yes, but only as seen from the limited perspective of the manifested universe. In the Bible, God does declare, I am there upon the Omega and the Alpha, and I am the living one. In the timeless realm of where God dwells, and upon which is your home, in the beginning of the end, and the Alpha and the Omega are one, and the essence of everything that has ever been and will be is eternally present in a manifested state of oneness and perfection, totally beyond anything that human mind could ever imagine or comprehend. In our world of seemingly separate forms, however, timeless perfection is an inconceivable concept. Here, every conscious is which is light is emanating from the internal source, and it seems to be subject to a process of development, but this is due to our limited perception and it is not so obsolete in terms of. Nevertheless, let me continue to speak for a moment about the evolution of consciousness in this world. Everything that exists as being has God essence and has some degree of consciousness, otherwise it would not have atoms or molecules and it would disperse. Everything is alive. The sun, the earth, the plants, the animals, all humans are expressions of consciousness in varying degrees of conscious manifesting forms. The world arises when consciousness takes on shapes and forms, thought forms, and material forms. Look at the millions of life forms on the planet alone, in the sea, in the land, in the air, and then in each form is replicated in millions of times. To what end? It seems to someone that something is playing a game with form. This is what this ancient seers of Indian asked themselves. They saw the world as Lilas and a kind of divine game that God is playing. The individual life forms are obviously not very important in this game, and the sea and most life forms don't survive for more than a few minutes after being born. The human form turns to dust pretty quickly too, and then it's gone as if that had never happened. Is that tragic or cruel? Only if you can create a separate identity for each form. If you forget that it is consciousness and God's essence and expressing itself in form, but you don't truly know that until you realize your own God essence as a pure consciousness. If a fish is born into the aquarium and you call him John, write out a birth certificate to tell him about his family history, and then he will unite later and is eaten and fishing, and that is such a tragic moment. But it's only tragic because you have projected a separate self where there was truly none. You get a hold of a fraction of the dynamic process, a molecular dance, and a separate entity out of it, and the consciousness takes on the disguise of forms until they reach such complexity that it completely loses itself in time. In present-day humans, consciousness is completely identified with a disguise, and it only knows itself as a form in which lives in fear. And of this total annihilation of this physical and psychological forms, this is the egoic mind, and this is where its considerable dysfunction sets in. It now looks that something had gone very wrong somewhere along the lines of evolution, but even this is a part of the Lila, the divine game. Finally, the pressure of suffering created by this apparent dysfunction forces consciousness to disidentify from form and awakens it in form of a dream of form. It regains self-consciousness, but it is not far deeper level than it is lost. The process is explained by Jesus in his parable of the last sons. Of the leaves of his father's home squanders his wealth, and becomes destitute, and then forced by suffering to return home. When he does, his father loves him even more than before. The son's state is the same, which is not seen before, yet in the same. It was added dimension. of depth. The parable describes a journey from unconscious perfection through the apparent imperfection of evil to consciousness perfection. Can you know this deeper and wider significance of becoming present and the watcher of your mind? Whenever you watch the mind, you withdraw consciousness from the mind forms, and then it becomes what we call the weather, the watcher of the witness, or the witness. Consequently, the watcher, pure consciousness beyond the form, becomes stronger, and the mental formation becomes weaker. And then we talk about watching the mind, and we are personalizing an event that is truly of cosmic significance. Though you may have consciousness of waking out of his dream of identification of form and withdrawing from form, it is foreshadows it is already a part of an event that is probably still in a distant future as far as chronological time is concerned. The event is called the end of the world. When consciousness frees itself from its identification with the physical and the mental forms, it becomes what we may call an enlightened consciousness or presence. This has already happened to a few individuals and seems destined to happen soon on a much larger scale, although it is not absolutely guaranteed that it will happen. Most humans are still in the grip of egoic mind and consciousness identify with the mind run by their mind. If they do not free themselves from their mind and in their time be destroyed by it, they will experience increasing confusion, conflict, violence, illness, despair, madness. The egoic mind has become a sinking ship. If you don't get off, you will go down with it. The collective egoic mind is the most dangerously insane, destructive entity ever to inhabit this planet. What do you think happens on this planet if human consciousness remains unchanged? Already for most humans, the only recipe they can find for their own minds is occasionally a reverted level of consciousness below thought. Everyone does this every night during sleep, but this also happens to some extent during or using of drugs and alcohol to suppress excessive mind activity. If it weren't for alcohol, tranquilizers, and antidepressants or illegal drugs we would all consume in vast quantities, the insanity of human mind would become even more glaringly obvious than it is already. I believe that life, if we deprived of drugs, they would be a large part of the population would become deeper and more dangerous to themselves and others, and those drugs, of course, simply keep you stuck in the dysfunction. Their widespread use only delays the breakdown of the mind structures and the emergence of higher consciousness, which individual users may get some relief from daily torture inflicted on them by their own minds, or they may be prevented from generating enough consciousness presence to rise above thought and so find true liberation, falling back to a level of consciousness below mind, which is free of thinking and love of distance of the ancestors and the animals and the plants, and not an option for us. This is no way back. If the human race is to survive, it will have to go on to the next stage. Consciousness is evolving and throughout the whole universe in the billions of forms. So even if we didn't make it, this wouldn't really matter, but it is on a cosmic scale. No, now gain in the consciousness is never lost, so it simply express itself through other forms. But we have the very fact that I am speaking here and you are listening and you are reading it. This is a clear sign that this new consciousness is gaining foothold on the planet. There is nothing personal in this. I'm not teaching you. You are consciousness and you are listening to yourself. This is the Eastern saying, the teacher and the taught together create the teaching. In any case, the words in themselves are not important. I have another journal. I have everything written in my journals. Let me read this one. Thanks. They are not the truth. They only point to it. I speak from presence and ask that I speak to you may be able to join you in that state, although every word that I have used is history, of course, and it comes from the past in a language that does use words that I speak to you now and are carriers of high energy, a frequency of presence quite apart from the meaning they convey in its words. Silence is even more potent carrier of the presence, so when you read this or listen to me speak, be aware of the silence between and underneath the words. Be aware of the gaps. To listen to the silence, you're ever easy and more direct to become more present. Even if there is noise, there is always some silence underneath and between the sounds. Listening to the silence immediately creates stillness inside you. Only the stillness inside you can perceive the silence outside, and that is stillness. Other than presence, consciousness freed from thought forms. Here is a living realization of what we have been talking about. Let me take it back to this journal right here. Take it back. This is realizing pure consciousness by Eckhart Tolle in the book Power of Now. And I copied everything here in my affirmation journals. They're like probably like stacked up like that much. Anyways, I'm Max, and I hope you're listening. And until my next affirmation video, because it's unlimited, I'll talk to you later. Thanks for listening. Bye.